Welcome again to Strategies for Living with author and international speaker Doug Sparks. In this episode, Doug will be discussing the different temperaments. And now, here's Doug.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again on Strategy for Living. I want to circle back just a little bit from one of the previous episodes. We started talking about who are you? That was sort of the theme, and we were going through the physical attributes that you have. And now we're going to be talking about a little bit more of the emotional attributes. But I'd like to give you a couple of links that I think you might find healthy. There's a guy named Nick Vujicic, and he's an Australian motivational speaker. And Nick was born without any arms or any legs. And yeah, I know you think you got it tough. And of all things, he's a motivational speaker. The guy he's got a family, he's got kids, he's learned to swim, he's mobile. It's just an amazing story. So if for nothing else other than just inspiration, it's about I think there's about a 5 or 10 minute clip. We'll put the link down here in the bottom where you can click on it and watch the story of Nick. It's quite moving and very inspirational. There's another clip that I think would be helpful as well, and it's done by an Admiral McCraven. And Admiral McCraven was giving a commencement ceremony speech, I think, at the University of Texas, and he had been a Navy SEAL, and he talks about, I think, 10 principles for orienting your life in a way that's going to have meaning and significance. But he does it in a very clever way. It's very inspirational again. And I know a lot of times you hear stuff about, hey, make your bed. And you're thinking, how pathetic is that? You know, what importance could there possibly be of making your bed? Well, Admiral McCraven talks about that, and he puts it in such a way that's not only somewhat humorous, but also very profound. So give these two links a look. I think you'll find it both helpful and give you some understanding, but also just, we all need inspiration from time to time. We all need to hear stories about other people who've been successful, and people who've overcome challenges and impediments in their life. And somehow that gives us a little bit of inspiration in our own hearts and our own minds to be able to maybe step out and do some at least mini courageous things in order that we might end up being the people and the person that we have the potential of being. So I'm going to continue on here. We're talking about early on the physical attributes, genetics. Who you are is pretty much set in place. Can't change a lot about yourself. There's some non-physical attributes that we also get through primarily, through our genetic code, and these are called temperaments. Now, temperaments aren't necessarily, they're part of personality, but they're not, as such, they're not optional in the sense that you can choose one or the other objectively. You're kind of built with them. It comes with the package. It comes with who you are, and it's proclivities. So it's better to think of these temperaments on a continuum rather than in boxes, okay? So it's easy to try to think, oh, I'm this or that or that. No, obviously you're not any one thing. You're usually you'll have a tendency to be maybe more dominant in this area and a little bit less over here and a little bit less over there. But take it all together, not as something that's purely definitive, but something that will cast an overarching idea of what you're naturally inclined to do and not do. And so now this is different from character, okay? So character is what you do with your natural and your physical and your temperamental makeup. What you actually do with it ends up being character. So this is still part of the unchosen, unvolunteered part of your life. When you're born, you have these certain genetic proclivities in terms of your temperament. Now, there are a gazillion. I think I talked on one of the previous episodes about Galen back 200 years BC, and he had come up with the four sort of temperament types, and come to find out, he was pretty doggone close. So there's obviously a lot of in psychology, there's been a lot more work done on this, and there are literally dozens and dozens of different temperament quizzes, tests you can take to try to determine what your maybe primary or dominant temperament is, what your natural proclivities are. And so I encourage you, take at least 2 or 3, and you'll find that if you're and you have to answer really honestly. You can't. This is where you got to go back inside and say, now, not who I'm not responding as to who I think people want me to respond, but the real me living down there somewhere. The real me would answer this question this way. And if the more honest you are, the more accurate the tests come out, and then the better read you have of what you are basically your strengths, and then areas that, hey, this might need some work. One of the ones that has been recommended and is used often in psychological evaluations is called, its acronym is called OCEAN, and it's the five. They call them the Big Five, and psychologists and therapists use this a lot. Now, there's also like the Enneagram, which has 8 different characteristics, and it comes from a very ancient source. I think it actually comes from some roots in Zoroastrianism, so it goes back a really long way. And a lot of people really like that. They think it's a little bit more precise. And so there's just a lot of ways to do this. So I encourage you to do 2 or 3 and get an idea. But I'll just outline here the one OCEAN, which is a pretty accurate way of trying to figure out what your dominant characteristics are and the things that you would be considered, I guess, a positive, a strength in your temperament. So the first is with, obviously, in the acronym OCEAN. O stands for openness. Now, let me just add one little caveat here. As best as can be described, the primary characteristics for, I'll use the word success, but I'll put those in parentheses because that is a pretty loaded term. But the primary indicators of success or doing well are primarily cognitively intelligence, your IQ, as it were, how I guess you can say how intelligent you are, how smart you are. That is one of the primary indicators. Now, the good news is this. In almost all these temperament types, there can be, men and women are almost all the same except for a few little minor details. When it comes to the intelligent quotient, there is no difference at all between men and women, like right across the board. So gender or sex does not have any influence at all on intelligence. Now, when it comes to temperament types, people who tend to be really bright, really smart, and we'll get to when you get to conscientiousness, and highly conscientious, those are the ones that tend to naturally progress a little bit further. They seem to go a little bit higher, shall we say, up the hierarchy, and that's not a bad thing, because obviously if you've got a big tumor on your brain and you need brain surgery, usually brain surgeons are people who are pretty high in IQ and are very conscientious, because you just don't want them, taking a big axe and chopping a big hole and pulling stuff out. Hey, I wonder what this does, No, you want somebody who knows what the heck they're doing, and they're really conscientious, so that they go in and they're precise and they get everything just right. So in that case, hey, being high on the competence hierarchy is a really, really good thing. We want that. So all that to say that there's a way that these things work themselves out, so that each of us have a place in the hierarchy that we're best suited for. So with regards to openness, this is people who tend to be really insightful. They're curious. They like to live outside the box. They like original thinking. They hate status quo stuff. They're always out there in the forefront, questioning everything and looking at stuff in a different way, creative. And oftentimes people who are like this end up being in areas of arts and films and entertainment, the kind of things that require a lot of creativity and a lot of thinking outside the box. And so if that's you, then take that as a strength and know that, hey, you know what? This is something that I'm good at. I like doing this. And that's usually, it lines up with your temperament. Something you're good at and something you like to do, both, often go hand in hand with what your dominant temperament is. Now, I might just say this, with all 5 of these temperaments, it's not like you have 1 or 2 and then you don't have any of the rest. You've got all 5 of them to some degree, but some will be more dominant than others. And as you go through and take these tests, it'll show you what areas that are dominant in terms of your temperaments. The second one, C, is conscientiousness. Now, these are people who like detail. They're really diligent. They're also highly disciplined. They're reliable, and they're ambitious. So if you rank high in conscientiousness, you're going to love a challenge. You're going to love stuff out there that requires a lot of self-discipline. That means that you've really got to stay focused and that you're super reliable. If you say to somebody, I'm going to do that, you will do it. You'll be there. You can be counted on. Now, as I said, people who are high in conscientiousness are desperately needed in our society. We need folks that you can rely on. We need folks that are diligent and disciplined and hardworking and are motivated to do stuff. And so, not that one is better than the other, but we all have different functions and different places in this competence, in this hierarchy, and we all have a place that we can fit and do really, really well in. The next one, A, is agreeableness. And this is people that have a natural sort of compassion, a kindness. They like cooperation. They don't like conflict. They're loyal. They're true. They're real friends. They're very emotive in terms of feeling other people's feelings and feeling other people's pain and things like that. Now, the truth be known, for all the temps with male and female, it's almost an equal distribution. However, when it comes to agreeableness, women tend to be a bit more agreeable than men. And one of the explanations, nobody knows for sure, but one of the explanations is that historically and evolutionarily in an evolutionary state, primarily it's been women who have been responsible for babies and children and rearing children. Now, that's probably a good thing if you want to propagate the species, because if a man were to do this, he would put the kid down somewhere and forget where he put him and, wouldn't come back for a month. They'd go, I think I had a kid here at one point. But the compassion, that natural nurturing, that almost instinctive ability that women have to take care of the young, to foster and nurture them. It's not a big difference. But it's a significant difference. So it's nothing negative about that at all. It's just one of those things that in our culture and society and the way that we function, that when it comes to dealing with them, now it has some other aspects later on in life that need to be maybe attended to, but early on, it's something that is absolutely necessary and extremely important in our culture and society. Now, the last one is what's called trait neuroticism. And this has to do with the degree that you naturally sort of feel, I guess what they call negative emotion. And so there's some people that just naturally, when something happens, there's a kind of a fear response, or they get anxious, or they get worried, or it becomes problematic very quickly, and they're kind of constantly on alert. Let's say they're constantly alert for something bad that's going to happen. And that's, of course, if you're high in that, you're going to be, now if you're lower in that, you're going to be more or less, not fearless, if you're without fear, but less fearful, less anxious, as a consequence of your temperament, not anything that you are making volunteer choices about. So these are just natural, and I use the word proclivity a lot, but it means a natural intentional leaning towards something. And so as you do these temperament and personality testings, you're going to come back, and like I say, do several of them. Don't just do one, do several. And it's going to help you get a pretty good idea of what you will be good at and what you will like. So if you are, if you're somebody who's very compassionate and kind, and you're cooperative, and you're loyal, and you really care for others, something along the lines of nursing, or along the lines of doctors, along the lines of social work, therapy, physical therapists, psychological therapists, anything that helps other people. So, and I mean, God knows we all need this. So it's not that one of these is better than another. Absolutely not. There's no value placed on any of these at all. So what you're going to find is what are your strengths, and then what are areas that you probably need work on. So for example, somebody who's highly conscientious, they're probably going to need to work on their agreeableness, because and again, remember that continuum. Conscientious is a good thing if it's here. If it moves too far in one direction, then it usually becomes overbearing, arrogant, mean-spirited, don't care for other people. So we all need all of these 5 temperaments equally spread out on this continuum in order to get a good understanding of not only who we are, but then who we want to become. And so I encourage you, when you get this, write these down, write them out, because there's a power when you sit down and write things out. And I would say even opposed to typing them out on your computer. And I'm old school. I realize I'm super old school. But there's something about taking out a pen and paper. There's something about the old diary thing where you would write in your diary. We had a girl with us one time in Cyprus. She was from Egypt, and she was just learning English. And I was talking with her one day, and she said, Doug, I'm writing everything down in my diarrhea. And I go, oh, that's interesting. That's different. And I'm assuming she meant her diary. So yeah, we're talking about a diary here, the little book thing that's got pages in it. You probably have heard of them. Anyway, write it down and look at it and say, okay, it looks like I'm high in neuroticism, for example, okay? I naturally tend to be more fearful. I naturally tend to be more anxious. Okay, what am I going to do to not do away with that? What am I going to do to maximize that? What do I have to do to make sure that that doesn't become a controlling factor in my life that keeps me from doing things? And so one of the things is obviously recognizing it. So when an opportunity comes along, people who are higher in trait neuroticism will go, oh no, I can't do that. Oh no, their first response is, And now somebody who's maybe more high in extrovert, I'm sorry, I missed one, mixed extrovert, we'll get back to that. But if you're high in extrovert, something new comes along, man, you're all in it. You're all over it. I love this stuff. It's new, it's challenging, but man, this should be fun. So for every strong or every dominant part of our temperament, there also is going to be an area that you need to work on or manage it. Now, I did skip one. I'm sorry about that. It's extroversion. If you are high in extroversion, that means that you are outgoing, usually very energetic, and have a sense of confidence about you. Now, extroverts they're a lot of fun. They're like the life of the party a lot of times. And oftentimes they're really confident about what they say and things, even if they know what they're talking about or not. So if you know somebody that's high in extroversion, you kind of, in the sense of, a grain of salt, take them. But they're usually, like say, they're the life of the parties. They bring a lot of high energy into everything. Everything's exciting. Everything's fun. This is, but the main characteristic, and this is what a lot of people don't know, the main way you can tell whether you're an extrovert or an introvert has to do with how do you recharge your internal batteries. Now, a lot of people might be a little bit surprised that I happen to be a really, really strong introvert. Okay, so for me, being out in public, and my wife, for example, is a really strong extrovert. So when we go out to a party or go into an evening out and we're in a group where we don't know anybody, she'll come away from that event energized. Wasn't that fun, man? That was so great. She's feeling great about it. And I come away going, oh my God, I'm exhausted. This is like so much work. So that's another way to tell, either if you're introvert or extrovert, is how you charge the batteries internally. And so if you can take these, like I say, these characteristics, these attributes, and write them down, find out what your strengths are, and oftentimes you'll have a dominant one, and then you'll have maybe a secondary one as well. So you could be very high in conscientiousness and also in agreeableness. And there's no bad combination, okay? So this is not a good or bad situation at all. There's no moral value placed on any of this. It's just simply an objective interpretation of genetically how you are predisposed to act. And all of them carry with them wonderful possibilities for doing great things. Also, if you don't manage them and if you don't utilize them in the right way, they can also be a negative effect on you, and you're just going to live within a little box or a little thing and never develop your full potential. And so these are hand tools, as it were. These are tools to help you become the person that you were created to be. It helps you to come to natural fulfillment and exhibiting and releasing the full potential of who you are. And so it's work. I have to tell you this. It doesn't just happen. Once you figure out, your dominant trait patterns are, then it takes if you're low in discipline, you need to maybe amp that up a little bit, because it takes real work. And by the way, nothing good ever comes about almost without hard work. And I hate to tell you that, but there's no, as far as I can tell. And believe me, I've tried. I've tried taking shortcuts, and not work. It doesn't work very well. So hard work is indispensable in anything that we do, but primarily in working with these things. It's work. You got to sit down. You got to kind of map it out, and then you got to conscientiously, intentionally look at it and say, what are my weaknesses? What do I need to work on? How am I going to do this? And then begin to put together a plan. And that's what we're going to be talking about in our next several episodes, and that is, how do we plan to make our lives fulfilling and meaningful and really be all that we can be, that we can live up to our full potential? Doesn't just happen, but it takes some strategic planning and thinking and understanding the nature of where we want to go and how we want to get there. So I hope you join us next time for the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. Join us next time on Strategies for Living with Doug Sparks.